It is Women's Retreat weekend, and so if you are a dad who had to get up this morning without your wife and you got the kids ready and you came to church, I say good on you. You are a much better man than me. I don't know that I could have accomplished that, and in fact my wife is so gracious, she comes back late on Saturday, so thank you, Brooke, for doing that, so she can help the kids actually get to church on Sunday to help me out. We're thankful that you have chosen to join with us. We're thankful that you put all the effort, all of you, we're thankful that you put in the effort to join us on this day. We are in week 2 of a series that is going to be 3 weeks long. It's called True Love. It is not what you think. I did not take this on because I have this amazing wealth of knowledge about love and marriage to share with you. I took this on because I think in our culture we have this kind of weird view of love. It's a little bit muddy. It's a little bit unclear. And I proved this to you last week by I asked you to yell back to me some things that you love. And when I asked you to do that, some of you said donuts. And others of you said Jesus. Some of you said my dog, and some of you said my wife. And I'm thinking we use the same word, but we have got to mean vastly different things. I'm hoping that we mean vastly different things when we use that word love. And I think what the problem is this. The problem is this. When we use that word, the vast majority of time, when we use that word, we're talking about one little aspect of that word, an aspect of this. We're talking about things that give us a really good feeling, things that give us that warm, fuzzy feeling. So it doesn't matter if it's hiking or if it's donuts or if it's, what do they call, fidget spinners, those things the kids are playing with today. Those give you those, somebody said, oh, I know, they are annoying. But some of you don't know what I'm talking about. The middle schoolers are with me and the elementary schoolers. Whatever it is, I don't know what it does for you, but it gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling. So you say that I love that. But that is such a limited view of what love truly is. And so as we're getting into this and we're talking about true love, what I'm trying to state to you is this. Love is not really a feeling. Love is more of a set of standards. It is a set of behaviors. It is an attitude that we have said, no matter what, I am going to come at every situation with this attitude. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about true love. There is a phrase that I gave you last week, and we're going to come back to it because it's an important phrase in this whole thing, and it's this phrase right here, that true love is not about compatibility. Normally when we say we love things, we're talking about things that we're compatible with. I love that food, it's compatible with my taste buds, right? I love hanging out with that person because our personalities are compatible. That is almost always what we mean when we use the word love. However, the deepest, most profound, life-changing understanding of love is not a feeling. It's not about just finding things that we are compatible with. In fact, there's a guy named Paul long ago who wrote a letter to some people in a city called Corinth, and we have that letter collected for us in the Bible, and he wrote in there. He was trying to help them figure out a lot of controversies that they had going on, and he wrote this powerful, this profound message about love. And when we read it at the very beginning, we realize that he's talking about something bigger than just compatibility. In fact, he starts it off by writing this. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. We look at that and we say, wait a second. Patient? I don't want to be patient with things that I'm compatible with. I don't want to be patient with like chocolate. I just eat it, right? And it's good. I don't want to be patient with that TV show. I just love it. But Paul is talking about something totally different. We know that. We recognize that, but the problem is we very rarely mean that when we talk about love. What Paul is saying is the way to find true love, the way to experience true love is not to just go through life and trying to find things that you're compatible with. The way to experience true love is asking yourself this: am I willing to change? Am I willing to adjust? Am I willing to possibly even sacrifice some of my wants or desires for the sake of someone else? That's what he is challenging us to. That's why we're spending a little bit of time on it. And since we're talking about change, what I'm offering to you throughout these next few weeks is what I'm calling transformative thoughts. Now, I have to give a little disclaimer. Last week I said we'd do 2, and we did. I held to that promise. This week I said that we were going to do 5. I'm not holding to that promise. So have a little patience, be a little forgiving. We're only going to do 4, okay? I'm making a little adjustments. That's what I get for telling you, making a promise about a sermon that I haven't finished writing yet. But we're going to be going through 4 of them today, but just as way of reminder, let me remind you of what last week's were. We talked about accepting that most of what you'll face each day is beyond your control, and we talked about changing the scorecard for contentment. I'm going to say a bunch about that because I said a bunch about that last week. If you want to look it up, it's on our website, jeffcitychurch.com. There's a tab that says current series. You can click on that, and there's a media player, and you can listen to the sermons on that. We're having trouble with the graphics, so we've got old graphics on there, but the media player is going to be up to date, so you can listen to last week's and get a feel for what we're doing. But when we talk about those two transformative thoughts, what the goal was last week was that they would help us better experience the things that Paul writes about. The three things that we talked about last week. The ideas of patience and kindness and envy. Today, we're taking on a whole slew of some other stuff, okay? Look at this stuff that we're going to cover today. Boasting, pride, dishonoring others, self-seeking, being easily angered, keeping a record of wrongs, evil, and truth. Two things that you'll notice about that. First of all, you'll notice it's a bunch of bad stuff, right? It's a bunch of stuff to try to avoid. There's only like one good one up there. The second thing that you'll notice is this. You will notice that it would take us forever to try to go through all of those things, and nobody wants to be here all day. There's good news. Those things can all be summarized into two things that we are going to talk about today. The two things that we're going to talk about today are pride and anger. And I think there's a good reason that when Paul sat down to write this letter, and he was writing this part out to the people who were living in that city of Corinthians, I think he had something going on in the back of his mind. Because you see, Paul, he was a good Jew, right? He grew up a Jew. He knew all of the stuff that Jews knew. Before he met Jesus, he had committed his life to following all the commands of the Jewish law. And as a good Jewish man, he would have taken a class when he was a little boy. There was a class that all little boys had to go through. He would have studied this book. And this book is a collection of sayings by one of their great kings of the past. The king was King Solomon. Now, if you don't know King Solomon, a lot of times people just kind of know one thing about him. He was the guy that when he was given the option by God for anything that he wanted, he could have said money. He could have said, I want more wishes. I don't know what he could have said anything. But he didn't. He said, I want wisdom. I want wisdom to be able to lead my people. And so Solomon was known for having all of this wisdom. And he wrote them, people followed him around and they wrote down some of the things that Solomon would say. They collected them in a book. And fortunately, just like we have that letter to the Corinthians collected in our Bible, we have this book collected for us in our Bible. It's one called Proverbs. Here's the thing. Even if you're not a church person or you've grown up in church and you know a ton about the Bible, you know a bunch of the Proverbs, right? Let me just go through some of that are familiar. Pride comes before a fall. That's one of those ones that's just kind of, we remember that one. If you get overconfident, if you get too prideful, you stop doing the things, you stop working hard, doing all the things that got you where you are, and then you end up failing. That's one that we kind of know. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Sorry, kids. This one's about discipline, right? We don't want our kids to be offensive to others. We don't want our kids to have a hard time in life, and so we don't spare the rod. We discipline them so that they are a joy to be around. The other one, a friend loves at all times. That's one that is a proverb that a lot of people know. They don't know it came from the Bible. Another one, beauty is fleeting. That's one that we know. A lot of people have quoted it. And the last one is one of my favorites, and it's this one. Daddy always gets the big piece of chicken. Right? That is one of my favorite proverbs. It's not in there, but it should be. I really believe that should be in there. Because it's true, Daddy does always get the big piece of chicken. But here's the thing. Not only did Solomon have this God-given wisdom, but he also got a certain experience. Kings in that day weren't exactly like kings that we think of. One of the things that they would do is they would sit and act as judges. They would get on their throne and people would bring before them some controversies. There would be conflicts, they would bring legal disputes, and the king would make a judgment, or he would help those people work that thing out. And that is something that Solomon helped people with over and over again. So not only was he wise, but he got a certain experience that helped him. And the experience was this. He saw people's problems on a daily basis. And when he did that, he was able to come to some conclusions. There are common denominators in our conflicts. There are some of the things that you just see show up time and time again. And he came to the conclusion that this, two of the things that come up over and over again are pride and anger. And so, some of his sayings in Proverbs, over and over and over again, we see those two topics come up. He talks about pride, and he talks about anger. And so, I'm going to go back and forth a little bit today. We're going to talk about Paul and what he wrote in 1 Corinthians, and then we're going to talk about maybe a proverb that he was thinking when he wrote that particular thing. That's what we're going to do. So we did patience and kindness and envy last week. Let's open up our Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, or scroll down into your app, go into 1 Corinthians to 13, and scroll down to verses 4 and 5. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. I'll read the whole thing now, and then we'll focus in on different phrases. It does not boast. It's talking about love here. Love does not boast. Love is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Let's zero in on that top phrase. It does not boast. It is not proud. We've all kind of have our encounters with pride, haven't we? Pride is one of those things that does a couple of really destructive things. I think that Paul knew this. I think that King Solomon knew this. I think that Paul may have been thinking of this other proverb when he wrote this. Where there is strife, there is pride. But wisdom is found in those who take advice. The wise people can say, you know what? I don't know how to do this. The wise person can say, you know what? I need some help. And they are willing to talk to someone and ask someone. But the prideful person, I would rather go alone. I would rather be wrong than have to admit that I possibly don't know how to do something. And so here's what happens. Pride is the driving force that keeps many of us from being able to make the change that we need to make, from being able to have the conversation that we need to have. Pride builds up a wall between you and others. You got all the answers. You don't need to ask anybody. You're going to go along your way because they could not possibly help you. It builds that wall. There is another wall that pride builds. And this is not from Proverbs. This is another thing that Paul would have been familiar with, though. It's from Psalm chapter 10, verse 4. It says, in his pride, the wicked man does not seek him. In all of his thoughts, there is no room for God. Not only does pride build up a wall between you and other people, it builds up a wall between you and God. Now, a lot of us think that if we have a problem with God, it came from something else. We say two things are really popular. We say it came from my hard, tragic experiences. I've just seen so many bad things in my life. I have so much sorrow that going on. And I've seen these experiences. I just can't talk to God. I just can't have a relationship with God. And I know that those things are incredibly tragic, incredibly difficult, but I wanted you to know this. There are people that you are sitting beside today, right now. There are people throughout history who have encountered incredible tragedy, and they have given to us some of the most amazing, some of the most inspiring stories, precisely because in their grief, in those experiences, they found God. God met them in those places. I promise you, your experiences, your difficult times do not have to build a wall between you and God. But there's another reason we give. We say, it's my intellect. I just know too many things. I'm too reasonable a person. I've done too much study. My intellect is what comes between me and God. And you probably have a ton of great arguments. But I also want to remind you this. There have been geniuses throughout history. There have been amazing world leaders. There have been people that I'm just going to say, and I don't mean to offend any of you, there have been people that are just as intellectually capable, maybe even more so, than anybody in this room. And you know what? God was still not too crazy for them. They came to the conclusion that God is real. They embraced God. They had strong walks with God. Your intellect does not have to be a barrier between you and God. What it's saying here in this psalm, that when we have pride, there is no room for God in our thoughts. It is saying that most likely it's not your painful experiences, most likely it's not your intellect that's coming between you and God. Most likely what it is, it's your pride and being willing to see beyond yourself. We know, we've experienced it. We know that pride is one of those things that builds a wall between us and others. Pride is a thing that builds a wall between us and God, and however, we don't want to deal with it. It is hard to admit that we need to work on this particular thing. In fact, what we want to do, instead of working on it, what we want to do, we want to outsmart it, right? We're going to figure out how to do that, and we always end up looking more foolish in the attempt. President Ronald Reagan tells this story, and I think it's a great example of this. One time he was given a speech in Mexico City, and he got up to give his speech, and as he's going through his speech, he's kind of disappointed because what's happening is he's used to getting these great applauses. And while he's going through his speech, people are just kind of like, every once in a while there's a clap. And even when he gets to the very end, he has this big finish, and he turns around and walks away, very few people are clapping for him. Then, right behind him, a representative from the Mexican government gets up. The representative from the Mexican government gets up, and he starts talking. He's speaking in Spanish, so Reagan doesn't know what he's saying. But every other line, people are going crazy. He's getting these massive ovations, and he is sitting there, Ronald Reagan, and he's getting jealous. He's getting his pride really injured because this guy's getting all this applause. And so he's like, I've got to hide this embarrassment, so I've got to do something. So what he decides to do to hide his embarrassment is he says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start clapping before anybody else. I'm going to clap louder than anybody else, and I'm going to clap longer. So like when everybody else starts clapping, I'm going to be the last one that drowns out. So he starts to do this to mask his embarrassment because his pride has been hurt. And the U.S. ambassador who's sitting next to Reagan says, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And he says, why not? And he says, because he's just interpreting your speech. So he's sitting there giving this great applause to his own speech and looking like an arrogant person. And there was his pride that he was trying to be. So often we try to outsmart our pride, and it just doesn't work. See, C.S. Lewis, which I think it's funny that Justin's talked about C.S. Lewis, he said something about pride, and we know it to be true. Anger, greed, drunkenness, they're all mere flea bites in comparison. For pride leads to every other vice. Pride is that thing that can get into us and keep us from complimenting someone. It can keep us from having the conversation we know we need to have. It can keep us from apologizing. It devalues the other people in our lives, period. And whether we realize it or not, we are communicating things to the people in our lives. When you act in this way and you refuse to talk, you refuse to ask, here are some things that you may be communicating to the people in your life. That other person may be thinking something like this. He won't ask because he doesn't believe I could possibly have the capability to help. So we devalue them. Ladies, we might be causing him to say, she won't apologize because I don't mean enough to her. And we devalue them. Maybe something else. She'd rather preserve her pride than make things right with me. That's what we communicate. And once again, we tell them that they're not as meaningful to us. And lastly, guys, we could do this. Make them say, he won't acknowledge that I'm right because deep down, he doesn't think I could possibly be smart enough to have a good point. And you know, here's the deal. We might not say this out loud. We might not say this explicitly, but this is what our actions communicate. This is how we're making the people in our lives feel when we don't deal with our pride. So I want to offer to you just one little thing that we can do to start to chip away at that pride. It's our first transformative thought, and it is this. Apologize when you think you may have done something wrong. Notice this. Notice that it says when you think, and not when it's been irrefutably proven to you that you have done something wrong. Because as prideful people, if it has to be proven to us, we're not going to admit it, right? We can't possibly be wrong. But when you think, and here's the deal, there are always cues as to when something might be going on that we need to apologize for. Normally, they make eye contact with you, and they're avoiding eye contact with you. You ask for the salt. Instead of it getting handed to you, it gets thrown at you, right? A little bit of a cue. It's one of those deals where he normally greets you with a kiss, and now you're avoiding physical contact at all. You know that these things are going on. I'll tell you what, if you don't know, just ask, because I promise you they know. And they can explain it to you. But I want you to think about this. Honestly, ask yourself, when is the last time? When is the last time that you have been willing to go to someone and say, hey, I blew it, and I apologize? And I don't mean about little stuff. You talk too loud while they were on the cell phone, and so you're like, sorry. I mean serious stuff, that you were able to go to them and say, I am sorry. I need you to forgive me. I want to suggest to you, if we are willing to do that, if we are willing to start to apologize, we can start to chip away at the pride in our lives. The next line that Paul writes, it also has to do with pride. It is this. Love. Love does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. I don't know what was going on that Paul was maybe referring to about how people maybe dishonor others in order to make themselves feel better. But I do know this. It had been going on a long time. Back in Proverbs, King Solomon knew about it. Those who have no sense deride their neighbors, but those who have understanding hold their tongues. Even way back in Solomon's day, people would talk about other people in order to make themselves feel better. We dishonor others because of self-interest. I don't know how it happened back then, but I kind of know how these conversations go today. Us guys will sit around, we'll be in a conversation, and one of the things that can make us guys feel good is knowing or just agreeing that we're not as dumb as that other guy, right? So we end up having this conversation that's like, hey man, did you see how he fixed that? I would have never fixed it that way. Did you fix it that way? No, I don't fix it that way. Idiot, right? We dishonor him to make ourselves feel better. Ladies, I can't get inside your mind, but I know there's little conversations that go on that are something like, did you see what she posted? I would have never posted that. She is crazy. Filter was off. Angle was all bad. See what she was wearing? Or our kids get involved. Did you see what her kid was doing? I'd never let my kid do that. Would you let your kid do that? No. And so we dishonor others to make ourselves feel better. And there is this maybe unintended consequence that happens when we choose to make those decisions. The unintended consequence is this. If I'm willing to talk to you and dishonor that other person, you have to wonder, am I willing to talk to him and dishonor you? If we're willing to have these conversations where we make fun of others, well, are you also willing to have conversations with them and make fun of me? And so when we dishonor others, one of the unintended consequences that happens is we erode the foundations of good relationships. We erode trust. I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if you're saying this kind of stuff about me. We erode respect. Respect for each other, respect for the other people in our lives. And so, if we have to say something, if we have to intrude upon the other people in our life, then I want to suggest this other transformative thought. This other transformative thought is this: build others up. This is not brain surgery, right? This is not crazy stuff. I'm not telling you stuff that you don't know we need to do, but I'm reminding you of it. Because obviously it's so important. Paul wants us to battle with our pride. We need to learn to build others up. I need to go to that friend and point out someone else and say, hey man, you know what he does that is so good? Because here's the thing. If I just go up to someone and I say, hey, good job, and I give you an encouragement, that's awesome. That's great. We need to be doing that kind of thing. But then they look at us and we get a little bit of payoff for that, right? We can feel good that we've complimented someone. But if I really want to work on my pride, I go to someone and I talk about someone else. And I say, that person's really good at this. I go to him and I point at another guy and I say, man, he sees things that most people don't see. He is really talented. And if I'm willing to do that, I don't know if that compliment will ever make it to him. But here's what I've done. I've done just the opposite of what dishonoring people does. When you dishonor people, you erode trust. You erode respect. But when you build others up, especially when you build others up who can't even hear you, you build up trust. You build up respect. And we all know it. That person who's willing to build others up, they're probably pretty capable themselves. That person who is willing to build others up, that's probably the person that I want on my team. That's probably the person that I want to go through life with. So I'm suggesting to you, if we are willing to apologize, if we are willing to build others up, then we will chip away at the pride in our lives that is keeping us from experiencing the kind of love that is most significant, the kind of love that is most life-changing. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, pivots from pride to talk about our second topic of the day, and it's this topic right here. He writes, love is not easily angered. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Now, this is a tricky one. This is a hard one because we're talking about anger. And anger has some payoff, right? It can make us feel strong. It can make us get some things done when we feel it, when we have a little anger in our lives. But I want us to remember something that King Solomon wrote, again, back in the Proverbs. He said, a hot-tempered man must pay the penalty. Rescue them, and you'll have to do it again. He says, you know these people in your lives. They're these people that it's something little, it's an argument about maybe he didn't call me back, and then all of a sudden it becomes something like, they are the most selfish person in the world, right? It becomes a huge deal. But here's the thing. Often if we have angry people in our lives, what we often do is we rescue them. We do the exact opposite of what Solomon says to do. He says, don't rescue them. There needs to be a consequence, but we rescue them by not saying anything. We just keep our opinion to ourselves. We don't talk to them. We leave the room, and when we come back, we don't deal with it. We act as if nothing happened. Because here's the deal. When we try to work with it, we don't know what to do. It just ends up being another argument. So that's why we need to spend some time on it today. Now, those of you who might be people who deal with anger in your lives, you might be saying, I don't have easy anger. I have holy anger. Right? I got principles that I'm arguing about. I believe in right and wrong. This is not a problem. This is a good thing. Well, here's the deal. We need to understand this. There is a huge difference between holy anger and easy anger. And I want to define some of those because these are going to help both you and the people in your life deal with them rather than avoid them. 3 things I want to make known to you or talk to you about that are ways to distinguish between easy anger and holy anger. Easy anger helps you feel strong. We got a baby having some easy anger going on, getting angry. It's okay, honey, I'm going to teach you how to deal with it. Easy anger helps you feel strong. Holy anger happens when you already are strong. Here's what I mean by that. And this is a nuanced difference, but it's a very, very important difference. If you have anger in your life that you fall back upon to try to feel strong, then most likely what has happened is you have had something happen in your life that has forced you to feel weak. And I want you to hear this. I'm not standing up here and judging you for having that experience. It was most likely beyond your control. I'm not judging you for even having the anger in your life. You're probably justified for having to experience what you had to experience. When we've had those things in our life, whether it's abuse or neglect or trauma, crisis, things have changed tremendously all around us and we're wondering about our place in the world, anger can often be a foothold. It can be something that makes us feel strong. The problem is, it leads to all sorts of misery in life. One of the things that's miserable about it is this other differentiation between it and holy anger. Easy anger chases people away, whereas holy anger rallies people to you. Think about Jesus. Every once in a while, he would pull out some anger. He would have to set something right that was wrong. Nevertheless, whenever he went out, people flocked to him. Children wanted to be around him. If you are someone who is angry a lot, and you find people wanting to avoid you, you find yourself isolated, you find yourself lonely, then most likely, it's not holy anger. It's easy anger. And there's this last differentiation between easy anger and holy anger. Easy anger is general and constant. It's about everything, and it happens all the time. Holy anger is specific and in a moment. When we have holy anger, we see a situation, there's somebody being treated with injustice, and we say to ourselves, I've got to help. I've got to do something about that. With easy anger, everything sets it off. It doesn't matter if it's technology or your sister's stupid boyfriend or menu options or people who don't know how to drive. All this thing makes us crazy, right? And any one of those things on its own, that's okay. But when it's all of this stuff, we develop this bitterness. We develop this thing where it is this constant criticism of everybody in our lives. I'm reading this book called A Man Called Uva. If you've seen the movie or if you've read the book, don't talk to me about it because I'm not finished with the book yet. But there's this part that I have gotten to that is, I think, just about what we are talking about right here. He comes to a time in his life where he experiences something really difficult. He loses someone he loves. And the author writes that he began to sprinkle anger around wherever he went. And one of the things that he decided to take on was he's going to write letters. And so he starts writing letters to everybody who does something that makes him mad. He writes letters to the insurance company, to the doctor, to teachers, to his neighbors. Everybody's getting a letter. And it's a daily routine for him. And there's this poignant scene in the book where his wife comes over to him and she puts her hand on the pen and she says, Uva. He's got a funny name because he's from Sweden. She says, Uva, there's no room for living with all of these letters. And he realizes in that moment that whatever he was trying to gain from his anger, it is nothing compared to what he is losing by neglecting the people in his life. And I say that to you. And so what I want to suggest to you is that we take on this transformative thought, and it's this idea that we need to identify those hot spots. Because anger comes from different places for different people. Your source is not going to be the same as someone else, but we've got to think about what is causing me to have this bitterness and this criticism constantly in my life. Because you know how the story ends. You've experienced the broken relationships. You have experienced the isolation. You know how that story ends. But what I want to hear you today, what I want you to hear from me today is this. It doesn't have to end that way. There is time to write a new story if we're willing to deal with the anger, if we're willing to deal with the pride, if we are willing to talk to someone about it and find out what those things are. The last thing that Paul writes in this section is, it does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. This is a weird little statement in the midst of all this, because he's given all this practical stuff about pride and anger and envy and all, and then he talks about evil and truth, which is kind of weird that he throws it in there. But I think there's two reasons. First of all, he's switching gears. He just finished this long section of all the things we need to avoid, all the bad things that we've been talking about today. And next week, the whole section that he's talking about are the good things. So it's a little bit of a transition, but I think there's another reason. He once again is remembering King Solomon in a proverb that he wrote. And that proverb is this: the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. And he defines evil as this: pride, arrogance, contrary speech. To delight in evil means to go around in life being blinded by the pride and the anger that you have. To rejoice in the truth means this. The word for truth, it's a Greek word that Paul wrote right here, and the word literally means to have the blinders taken off. To rejoice in the truth means to open your eyes to that pride and anger, to work on it, and to embrace what Paul is offering to you, because it's leading to rejoicing. It is leading to relationships you can celebrate, you can have peace with. That is where it's going. So I encourage you to ask yourself this last transformative thought. Ask, what future am I creating with my actions? Because you all know that you need to seriously ask it. We talk about this idea that Jesus wants to save us from sin. And usually when we use that term, what we mean is he wants to save us from hell. He wants to save us from that thing that's far off one day. He doesn't want us to have to experience that pain. And so he's forgiven us of our sins, and he wants to save us from hell. But there's more to it. That is absolutely true. But he also wants to save us from the consequences of our sin that we experience in the here and now. He wants to save you from the consequences. He wants to save you from the future that your pride and your anger are leading you toward. The question is, are you willing to accept his alternative? Are you willing to accept true love? It's a love he's already displayed for you. He was willing to take on the cross to pay that penalty of sin, but also to show you and give you a better way. As we sing this song that we're going to conclude with today, it's another song about the great love of God. And I want you to think about that love, but I also want you to think about what that love is calling you to do in your life.